when that movie came out. Was anything cut from that film?
The studio actually legally couldn't trim it. They couldn't cut anything.
Little red devils, they love toys. May I try one?
Please do, sir.
Thank you, thank you. These things are defective.
It's the line that made audiences roar with laughter, the one quoted for decades, etched into movie history. But what if Blazing Saddles' most loved moment wasn't in the script at all? In a film famous for its fearless humor and chaos behind the scenes, one unscripted word changed everything. It wasn't planned, rehearsed, or even approved, yet it became pure cinematic gold. How did one accident turn into the line that defined an entire comedy classic? The truth is even funnier than the joke itself. When the West went wild, when Blazing Saddles hit theaters in 1974, audiences didn't know what had just happened to the Western genre. The movie galloped onto screens like a wild horse that refused to be tamed. Loud, chaotic, and utterly fearless. It wasn't just another cowboy comedy, it was an explosion of satire that mocked everything from racism and Hollywood stereotypes to the idea of what a Western was supposed to be. The film didn't just cross lines, it erased them. Mel Brooks wasn't out to make a traditional Western. He wanted to blow it up from the inside and laugh while doing it. At the time, Westerns were predictable. Stoic heroes, damsels in distress, and moral endings tied up with a bow. Then, Blazing Saddles rode in, swinging a hammer of irony. It opened with a black sheriff, a terrified town, and a plot so outrageous it could only come from Brooks's mind. He saw the West as a stage to expose America's contradictions. Here was a genre that worshipped rugged individualism, yet ignored its own prejudice. Brooks turned it into a mirror that reflected how ridiculous those movie myths really were. Part farce, part protest, part therapy for a culture that didn't know how to laugh at itself. Pulling it off wasn't easy. Warner Brothers had no idea what it was funding when it approved the film. Expecting another harmless spoof, the studio instead got a loud, vulgar, and politically explosive comedy that mocked Hollywood itself. During early screenings, some executives didn't laugh once. Others wanted the film buried, calling it too crude and too dangerous. One reportedly warned, "You can't put this in theaters. People will riot." Brooks, unfazed, replied, "They'll riot with laughter." That confidence came from the writing room. If chaos could be called a room, Brooks assembled Norman Steinberg, Alan Uger, Andrew Bergman, and the legendary Richard Pryor. Fueled by whiskey, exhaustion, and endless arguments, they wrote like men possessed. Brooks later joked it was 5 drunken men trying to outdo each other. But through that madness came brilliance. They weren't just making jokes. They were creating a cultural hand grenade disguised as a Western. Blazing Saddles shattered all notions and stereotypes of the cowboy picture, the handsome gunslinger, valiant settlers, and cliched morals. Rock Ridge had few heroes, but rather legions of ignorant bigots. This sheriff was not white and taciturn, but black, witty, and aware of his situation. Instead of discreet dueling, patrons brawled with one another and broke into song and dance. Brooks didn't reinvent the Western. He incinerated it. Sufficiently sober beneath all the absurdity and chaos, the film captured the rhythm of a nation learning to laugh at its own contradictions, turning controversy into something immortal. It pelted racists with ridicule, making them look foolish, and allowing audiences to laugh at their own ignorance. It was unapologetically honest. A film that dared to say what others wouldn't, and did so through punchlines, not preaching. Still, in that awfully neat and strategically created disorder, a variant event put into operation might have been the single crowning point of the whole thing, a moment of spontaneity that was so inherent it did not even appear as a harsh deviation from the line of action. In other words, the most spontaneous moment in the history of the world's cinema. It was not in any way arranged. It was not any setup. It was just one of the pure instinct breaks that hit the screen. This measly flaw would eventually become the movie's soul. It was an embodiment of the brilliance amid chaos and the wisdom beneath the laughter. A few little words that slipped out by mistake became a part of the world's cinematic history. Theoretically, the blunder that made Cleavon Little get out of character, and Mel Brooks refused to say, "Cut." The line that was never written, it happened so fast that no one on set realized history had just been made. The cameras rolled on what was meant to be a simple exchange, a quiet scene between Sheriff Bart, Cleavon Little, and the Waco Kid, Gene Wilder. The script called for a gentle speech about tolerance, blending humor with the film's deeper message about prejudice. But Gene Wilder's instinct overrode the page. What came out was unscripted and unforgettable. The moment followed Bart's disastrous first encounter with the people of Rock Ridge, the same townsfolk who had begged for a sheriff to protect them, only to recoil when that sheriff turned out to be black. It was painfully funny, Bart trying to charm them, the crowd glaring in disbelief. Later, slumped beside the Waco Kid, he asked the question every outsider knows too well. "What's wrong with them?" Wilder, serene and sharp, replied, "These are just simple farmers, people of the land, the common clay of the New West. You know, morons." That last word wasn't in the script. Wilder added it on a whim, transforming a thoughtful moment into pure comedic brilliance. The crew stifled laughter. Cleavon Little tried not to break, and failed. Brooks didn't yell, "Cut." He let it play out. Little's laughter was genuine, not acting. That unscripted crack became one of the most beloved moments in film comedy. Brooks recognized magic immediately. It wasn't just funny, it was the film's essence distilled in one punchline. Blazing Saddles balanced on a razor's edge, daring to make audiences laugh at the absurdity of prejudice without normalizing it. Wilder's morons did exactly that. Satire reduced to its purest form, absurd, honest, and fearless. The rhythm sold it. Wilder delivered the insult like an anthropologist, not a cynic. Soft, reflective, almost weary. Little's reaction added warmth, the smile of a man too intelligent to be insulted. That chemistry turned what could have been bitter into something deeply human and hilariously real. Warner Brothers executives freaked when they were in the editing room, so much so that they thought that maybe that line would offend audiences and make them feel attacked. It was Brooks' refusal to take it out, which was something he was vigorous about. He knew the line was not mean. It was true. It mocked ignorance, not ordinary people. Comedy should make us laugh at our faults before starting to defend them, he argued. That is why it worked. It was blunt enough that it might not seem funny, but that's what made it funny. Everyone recognized a sliver of truth in Wilder's delivery. The scene turned out to address something ageless, shared absurdity, and the ability of laughter to reveal. Fans would, over time, end up quoting this line more than any other. It literally became the film's calling card. Brooks's philosophy in a breath. Fearless, insightful, and utterly unfiltered. Few, however, realized that it was never written, not even crafted in a rewrite, not brainstormed in a committee. It came from instinct, an actor so perfectly in sync with his role that he let truth slip through the cracks. This revolutionary edge is within Blazing Saddles, beneath the madness and slapstick, lies-y naked, raw honesty, and such an honesty arrived here by hurting its own genius. But it was nearly a wonder that such spontaneity ever came into being. That accidental spark didn't just survive, it nearly died in the studio crossfire, forcing Brooks to wage his boldest standoff behind closed doors. The magic of the mistake. No one could have planned it or written it better. That single word, morons, delivered so casually by Gene Wilder and followed by Cleavon Little's genuine laughter, became one of those rare cinematic accidents that define a film forever. It wasn't rehearsed or even discussed beforehand. It was pure instinct, the kind of unplanned brilliance filmmakers chase their entire careers. The day had been long and hot. The cast was tired, trying to capture the perfect rhythm for a delicate scene. Blazing Saddles constantly balanced between slapstick and social commentary. One wrong note could topple the tone. Cleavon Little's Sheriff Bart was calm and clever. Wilder's Waco Kid, the jaded philosopher of the West. Their chemistry, quiet, dry, unspoken, was already magic. When the cameras rolled, that chemistry stopped obeying the script. As the cameras rolled, the air on set changed. The exchange between Sheriff Bart and the Waco Kid was meant to land softly, but what happened next cut deeper than anyone expected. Wilder's delivery, calm, unhurried, and oddly tender, gave the scene a weight that wasn't on the page. Cleavon Little's spontaneous laughter, brief but genuine, revealed something that couldn't be scripted. A flash of real connection between two men divided by history but united in absurdity. Behind the camera, Mel Brooks instantly recognized the value of what he'd witnessed. He didn't call for another take or try to refine it. He understood that authenticity, not perfection, was what made comedy live. In that moment, the film stopped performing and started breathing. Decades later, that same spark still defines Blazing Saddles, a reminder that sometimes the most human truths arrive by accident, disguised as laughter. It was not just the joke, but the symbolism that made the instant beautiful. Brooks's humor and vision were risky, spontaneous, and chaotic. The actors, during the movie's whole production, were told to go past the limits, be their most daring selves, and see humor in the least expected. In fact, Brooks, also the director, did not want his written humor to be dead, but rather the live kind through improvisation. The morons line was simply the entire mission of the movie. It was not about scoffing at others, it was about laughing at the ignorance of itself. Calmly delivered by Wilder, the insult was not wicked. It was a truth that was too weary to wage. According to the film, discrimination is just another name for the ignorance parade, where a dark tradition is the thing that actually blinds itself. This is why that line is so hilarious and yet touching at the same time. It was when the movie was being edited that Brooks was struck with the realization that he had really struck gold. During the take, the sound technicians had even picked up a low laughter coming from outside the camera frame, which was enough evidence that the moment was the one to get. The laughter could hardly be heard, though. Most directors would have tried to rectify the situation in their favor, but Brooks did nothing about it. To him, there was no such thing as imperfection, as imperfection was really the most human thing of all. That line brought the house down when the movie first came out. It was not at all about physical comedy, or one that relies on a feeling of being shocked. Rather, it had the cornerstone of being straightforward. As though it were not a piece that was planned, the watchers could sense that they were witnessing something lively and true. Truth had slipped past the script. Now it had to slip past the suits, as memos piled up and a studio demanded scissors. The censorship battle. When Mel Brooks turned in the first cut of Blazing Saddles, the executives at Warner Brothers didn't know whether to laugh or panic. What they saw wasn't just a comedy. It was an explosion of every taboo Hollywood had avoided for decades. The racial jokes, the vulgarity, the political barbs, none of it obeyed the rules. For a studio clinging to its family-friendly image, this film felt like a grenade tossed into the boardroom. Brooks, of course, was grinning as he pulled the pin. From the start, Blazing Saddles was a problem the studio didn't know how to handle. Warner Brothers expected another offbeat Mel Brooks comedy, maybe something in the vein of The Producers. Instead, they got a film that mocked racism, greed, and the myths of the Old West, using language and imagery Hollywood had long avoided. Brooks didn't flirt with controversy. He built his set on it and lit the fuse. When executives saw the first cut, panic set in. According to Brooks, one executive stormed out shouting, "You can't release this! It's too crude, too filthy, too dangerous." Another drafted a list of scenes to cut. The racial slurs, the Bean Symphony, the horse punch, and anything involving Lily von Stupp. They feared protests and reputational fallout. Brooks didn't argue, he rebelled. He took the notes, crumpled them up, and tossed them in the trash. When Warner Brothers later asked if he'd made changes, he smiled and said, "Of course." He hadn't touched a frame. His confidence came from the only audience that mattered, the people. In early test screenings, crowds howled with laughter. Scenes executives had labeled offensive drew the loudest reactions. The jokes didn't alienate viewers, they liberated them. For the first time, racism was mocked so openly that laughter itself became defiance. Brooks knew softening the film would slay its power. Its truth, lived in its edge. Still, Warner Brothers was the one who had all the power. They could decide to prolong or to silently put the movie away, but Brooks teamed up with John Calley, who was the studio's president at that time, as a supporter. Calley took a look at the situation from a different angle, and he was the one who convinced the board to take a careful chance to take a risk by bringing out the picture in only 3 cities: Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. If it flopped, it would go off the radar without a sound. It turned out to be a great success. Everybody wanted to see the film, even on the first day. The distinctive feature of the movie and the limited number of times it was shown made the event bigger than it was, in fact. The theater's biggest risk turned out to be their most considerable gain. What Warner Brothers thought would be their downfall turned into a new comedy era and a better financial position for them. It was not only worth it that Blazing Saddles went on like that, but also the whole understanding of humor in the movie-making industry changed in a way. Brooks was the one who showed that risk might be a lucrative option, giving strong reason for the fact that audiences were already prepared to laugh at what society marked as taboos. However, he believed that satirical comedy just did the job of disassembling, cleaning, and finally rebuilding the old beliefs and stereotypes, and that was more powerful than any sermons. Back then, in 1974, it was a major development in the world. The TV was still taking out even mild swear words, and here came a spectacular movie with very strong language and the kind of jokes that will be told only to a limited audience. But Brooks was not intentionally being vulgar. Instead, he was making a very serious story funny and more tolerable through vulgarity. When on the wide screen, the same people from among the executives who insisted on the movie's cutting from the beginning were now claiming to be the reasons and initiators of the movie's success story. Brooks did not give any attention to anybody else, but felt he actually succeeded in a certain battle. Not in a meeting hall, but within the film itself. Chaos, controversy, and courage. The making of Blazing Saddles wasn't just a test of comedy, it was a test of courage. Every scene, every line, and every joke balanced between genius and disaster. In the early 1970s, America wasn't ready for a film that said out loud what people only whispered, but Mel Brooks dared to do it, to turn discomfort into laughter and chaos into courage. Brooks knew from the start that his film was dangerous. He wasn't simply parodying westerns. He was attacking racism and hypocrisy through punchlines. The slurs and stereotypes weren't meant to offend, they were meant to expose. He wanted bigots to look foolish, not powerful. Yet even among the cast, that intent took time to understand. Burton Gilliam, who played Lyle, one of the villain's henchmen, struggled with a line that used a racial slur against Sheriff Bart. He pulled Cleavon Little aside, uneasy about saying it. Little reassured him, "If I thought you meant it, we'd have a problem." But this is for the story. That quiet grace changed everything. Gilliam delivered the line, and the scene became what it needed to be. An uncomfortable laugh that revealed truth. Ironically, a film full of offensive words was teaching tolerance right on set. Cleavon Little's poise became the film's moral compass. As Bart, he embodied charm, intelligence, and pride without bitterness. His performance gave Blazing Saddles its soul. Amid all the slapstick chaos, he grounded the absurdity in dignity. "The joke isn't on me," he said later, "it's on them." That's the difference. Still, not everyone laughed. Early screenings divided audiences. Some critics hailed it as genius. Others called it vulgar or offensive. Even civil rights groups debated whether it went too far. Brooks stood firm. The only way to defeat prejudice is to make people laugh at it. Over time, laughter proved him right. On the film set, there was a vast amount of unplanned events and scenes going on. The mix of comedians, dramatists, and first-timers filled the air with bodies and elements that would react in the most unexpected of all ways. Brooks stressed being precise, yet chaotic at the same time. The cast would sometimes go, in 1 minute, from laughing tears to feeling that they went too far. Gene Wilder once told Brooks, "You're walking a tightrope without a net." Brooks responded with a grin. That's where the laughs live. The studio's anxiety was also an issue. The execs appeared at the set non-stop, fearing ramifications. Still, Brooks was very protective of his actors. We're not making fun of people. We're making fun of ignorance. That confidence made the actors feel free and produced great acting. Performances turned out to be more riveting, daring, and living. Slim Pickens, a cowboy in the real sense of the word, and the one who played Taggart, was a cowboy during the filming hours too. He slept in the open air and carried a gun most of the time. His genuineness was one of the film's greatest assets, as it helped to bring out the romance and essence of the movie. Madeline Kahn, as the seductive Lily von Shtupp, was responsible for injecting comedy and unintended power into sexuality. Her impersonation of Marlene Dietrich was so close to the original that she was nominated for an Oscar. This is an example of comedy boosting courage to the level of drama. Yet, a dispute was attached to the film as if it were a dust particle on a saddle. The censors claimed it was irresponsible. The critics called it vulgar. However, its influence was apparent. The viewers declared it a path-breaking experience. Blazing Saddles defied conventions. It thrust its way into the laughter and demanded it from the audience. The director Mel Brooks was the one who adopted the view that accepting humor with a significant element of danger was an absolute prerequisite for the laughter to reach its full vigor. For the alchemy to work, the ensemble had to be exactly, improbably right. And one last-second casting switch would steady the entire ride. Behind the guns, gags, and genius, behind the dust, dynamite, and dazzling chaos of Blazing Saddles was a crew of misfits who didn't just make a movie, they made a miracle. Every gag and brawl on screen was born out of disorder. The set was wild and unpredictable. Yet, from that storm, Mel Brooks forged one of cinema's sharpest comedies. The cast was a glorious contradiction. Gene Wilder's quiet precision stood beside football legend Alex Karras as the mighty Mongo and Slim Pickens, a genuine cowboy turned actor. It shouldn't have worked, but that clash of styles became the movie's secret weapon. Cleavon Little brought suave intelligence. Madeline Kahn delivered decadent absurdity. Pickens grounded the madness in grit. Brooks, the ringmaster, turned chaos into a symphony. The role of the Waco Kid wasn't even meant for Wilder. Brooks had first cast Gig Young, a talented but troubled actor. On day one, Young stumbled onto the set, drunk and slurring. Brooks shut production down, sent him home, and made a desperate midnight call to Wilder, who had just wrapped Young Frankenstein. Wilder flew in overnight, suited up at dawn, and from his first line, Brooks knew the film was saved. Wilder's calm, soulful delivery balanced the film's lunacy. His subtle expressions and quiet timing became the eye in Brooks's hurricane. When he ad-libbed the morons line, it wasn't just comedy, it was intuition. He embodied what made Blazing Saddles work: fearless honesty disguised as humor. Slim Pickens brought his own brand of rough authenticity. Refusing hotel comforts, he camped outside near the set, rifle at his side. "If I'm gonna play a cowboy, I'm gonna live like one," he told Brooks. That sincerity bled into every frame. His drawl and grit gave the satire a real Western soul. But genius isn't a straight line. So, the writer's room, the war zone, as claimed by Brooks, was a crazy place to be. Brooks, Norman Steinberg, Andrew Bergman, and other writers, among them Richard Pryor, were not only debating and revising the script, but also drowning their sorrows in alcohol. Brooks gave the latter account 5 drunks with typewriters, and The Hangover turned out to be incredibly funny. Despite being rejected for the part of Bart due to being too risky, Pryor still stuck around as a writer, vigorously contributing his insights and truths on racial matters to the film. As a result, his unapologetic narrative was a huge part of the film's boldness. This last project, but not the least, yet Kahn was simply phenomenal. In her portrayal of Lily von Shtupp, a character that sarcastically mirrors Marlene Dietrich, she was both sexy and repulsive. When Brooks demanded to check out her legs during a screen test, she promptly replied, "No touching." He burst out with laughter and cast her immediately. Brooks himself was actually the person who was in control of everything. He did all that there is to do: direct, work on the script, and even appear in the shots. He was never tired. In every situation, he was able to justify his joke and give an unreasonable thing a meaning. The gamble didn't just pay off at the box office. A stray syllable captured the legacy and turned an outtake into a banner for fearless comedy. When a mistake becomes a masterpiece. When Blazing Saddles galloped into theaters, no one, not even Mel Brooks, expected the explosion that followed. The film was loud, fearless, and utterly unlike anything audiences had seen. People didn't just laugh. They howled, clapped, and quoted lines before leaving the theater. And amid all its wild humor, one accidental line became its crown jewel. That offhand ad-lib became legend. The line wasn't in any script or rewrite. It was Gene Wilder's spontaneous spark, pure instinct from a performer who knew how to find truth in absurdity. Cleavon Little's laugh was real, unplanned, and too honest to cut. Brooks saw what he had, a flash of authenticity that made the comedy breathe. That moment captured what Blazing Saddles was built on: truth hidden inside chaos. That one word summed up the movie's entire point. Brooks had turned humanity's ugliest flaws, racism, greed, ignorance, into punchlines that stripped them of power. Wilder's line wasn't mean, it was honest, exposing stupidity through laughter. It was satire distilled into a single syllable, a smirk at prejudice itself. Audiences felt it instantly. At test screenings, the moron's line drew explosive laughter, breaking the tension and turning discomfort into joy. Within weeks, people were quoting it everywhere, unaware it was an accident. Critics hailed it as the smartest insult ever written, not knowing it was pure instinct. Brooks later called it a gift, saying, "You plan all week for a good joke, and then somebody sneezes in the right place. That's what they remember." It wasn't crafted, it was discovered, lightning in a bottle. But it wasn't luck alone. Brooks created an environment where spontaneity thrived. He welcomed mistakes, seeing them as opportunities rather than flaws, and encouraged actors to follow their instincts. That trust made his sets electric, where real laughter could happen without fear. The moron's line wasn't just an accident, it was the natural result of a creative space fueled by freedom, courage, and Brooks's genius for finding truth in chaos. Such a creative attitude was what made Blazing Saddles a film for all ages. Even after so many years, it is still sharp and edgy, a movie that mocks the very thing that all the others fear. The morons, quote, became an embodiment for the whole reputation of the film: fearless, honest, and profoundly human. The success that came next was just mind-blowing. The flick was up for 3 Academy Awards, grossed more than $100 million, and won a place in the annals of the world's most quoted comedies. Critics who previously saw it as low-grade came around and labeled it as a trendsetter. Brooks had triumphed in the proof that laughter could unmask bigotry as tough as any other form of censure, and that out of a mere error could still come a masterpiece. Forget about trophies and recognition. The very incident that was not part of the script but has come to define the film is quite poetic. It was an incident that became public knowledge and told everybody that the imperfect was the soul of the artist and art. The truth, even though clothed in the ridiculousness, remains the truth. And that is that. Brooks, Wilder, and Little, in their action, did not merely create a comedy, they stated a position. They demonstrated that if one can manage the chaos honestly, then the genius can be seen. Currently, Blazing Saddles brings about arguments. Is it possible to make a film of that sort now? To this question, Brooks answered in the negative. "We had it so easy back then," he quipped, "and half the time I'd be in all manner of trouble, right? But it was a good one because it was honest, not inhumane." Blazing Saddles was never just a movie. It was a rebellion in disguise. It proved that comedy's greatest power lies in the unexpected, and sometimes in the mistakes no one plans. If you enjoyed uncovering the truth behind one of film's most famous bloopers turned brilliance, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes legends that changed Hollywood forever. And when you're done, watch the next video on screen. There's another untold story waiting to surprise you.